Alright, welcome immediately back to Chapter 17, Part 2. Just wanted to make sure that Instagram doesn't kick us off at the end. It usually gives about 45 minutes. It's super annoying. Alright, here we go. He kissed slowly down my cheek, stopping just at the corner of my mouth. Bella, would I let a tree hurt you? His lips barely brushed against my trembling lower lip. No, I breathed. I don't... Is that how you're supposed to say it when, like, they breathe words? Is it just like, no? Like an exhale?
Yeah,
This,
basically. So she's just like... No. She's just fucking coming in her pain.
I knew there was a second part to my brilliant defense, but I couldn't quite call it back. You see, he said, his lips moving against mine. There's nothing to be afraid of, is there? You're not much older than Jacob.
It's so gross. And like immediately after he's like a child, and she's like, he's not that much younger than I am.
Know.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think I'm here?
He's so disgusting.
No, I sighed, giving up. Then he took my face in his hands, almost roughly, and kissed me in earnest, his unyielding lips moving against mine. He just shatters her. There really was no excuse for my behavior. Obviously, I knew better by now, and yet, I couldn't seem to stop from reacting exactly as if it was the first time. Instead of keeping safely motionless, my arms reached up to twine tightly around his neck, and I was suddenly welded to his stone figure.
Like a viper.
I sighed and my lips parted, shoved that tongue in there. He staggered
Like
back.
a sex scene before
No.
the baseball game.
No, it comes way too fast. He staggered back, breaking my grip effortlessly. Damn it, Bella! He broke off, gasping. You'll be the death of me, I swear!
You started it! You literally started it!
How dare you let me turn you on? I leaned over.
Why aren't you dry as the Sahara Desert, Bella? You're only 16.
I leaned over, bracing my hands against my knees for support. You're indestructible, I mumbled, trying to catch my breath. I might have believed that before I met you. Now let's get out of here before I do something really stupid. He growled. Oh, he's pissed. He threw me across his back as he had before, and I could see the extra effort it took for him to be as gentle with me as he was before. I locked my legs around his waist and secured my arms in a chokehold across his neck.
Kill him. Kill him, Bella.
Kill him, Bella! Don't forget to close your eyes, he warned severely. I quickly tucked my face into his shoulder blade under my own arm and squeezed my eyes shut. I could hardly tell we were moving. I could feel him gliding along beneath me, but he could have been strolling down the sidewalk. The movement was so smooth I was tempted to peek, just to see if he was really flying through the forest like before.
Tempted to pee.
I'm tempted. I'm just gonna pee all over Edward's back because I'm mad at him. I just wouldn't put it past these two.
No.
Like, Bella's like, well, I told you I was afraid. What'd you think? Of course I pissed on your back.
You stupid bitch.
And he'd be like, oh, Bella, you're urine.
The death of
I've
me.
completely lost my spot.
Oh.
I was tempted to peek, just to see if he was really flying through the forest like before. But I resisted. It wasn't worth that awful dizziness. I contented myself with listening to his breath come and go evenly. I wasn't quite sure we had stopped until he reached back and touched my hair. It's over, Bella. I dared to open... It's over. I dared to open my eyes, and sure enough, we were at a standstill. I stiffly unlocked my stranglehold on his body, and slipped to the ground, landing on my backside. Oh, I huffed as I hit the wet ground. He stared at me incredulously, evidently not sure whether he was still too mad to find me funny. But my bewildered expression pushed him over the edge.
He was literally mad at
He
her.
was pissed, yeah. I picked myself up, ignoring his laughter, as I brushed the mud and bracken off the back of my jacket. That only made him laugh harder. Annoyed, I began to stride off into the forest. I felt his arm around my waist. Where are you going, Bella?
Away.
To watch a baseball game. You don't seem to be interested in playing anymore, but I'm sure the others will have fun without you. You're going the wrong way. I turned around without looking at him and stalked off in the opposite direction. He caught me again. Don't be mad. I couldn't help myself. You should have seen your face. He chuckled before he could stop himself. Oh, you're the only one who's allowed to get mad, I asked, raising my eyebrows. I wasn't mad at you. Bella, you'll be the death of me, I quoted sourly. That was simply a statement of fact. I tried to turn away from him again, but he held me tight. You were mad, I insisted. Yes, but you just said that I wasn't mad at you. I hate this. That I wasn't mad at you.
Fucking headache.
Can't you see that, Bella? He was suddenly intense, all trace of teasing gone. Don't you understand?
And
See,
here we go again.
yeah, we're right back. It's full circle. See what? I demanded, confused by his sudden mood swings as much as his words. I'm never angry with you. How could I be? Brave, trusting, warm as you are. Warm because you peed on him. Also, meanwhile, his family's like 2 yards away, like, well, this is awkward.
You want to play baseball? The storm is moving.
You guys already took 3 hours to get
It's
here.
like anyone calling Bella warm.
Warm.
When she literally walks around all day thinking like, fuck you, your boobs are tiny, you're annoying.
Then why? I whispered, remembering the black moods that pulled him away from me, that I'd always interpreted as well-justified frustration. Frustration at my weakness, my slowness, my unruly human reactions. He put his hands carefully on both sides of my face. I infuriate myself, he said gently, the way I can't seem to keep from putting you in danger. My very existence puts you at risk. Sometimes I truly hate myself.
I am so tired of this
I should be
holiday.
stronger. I should be able to. I placed my hand over his mouth. Don't. He took my hand, moving it from his lips, but holding it to his face. I love you, he said. It's a poor excuse for what I'm doing, but it's still true. It was the first time he'd said he loved me, in so many words.
And
That's
in
not
such a
true.
Terrible way.
Like 2 chapters ago he said this.
Well, yeah, but it's a lie. But also, if it was the first time, it's a terrible way to tell someone you love them for the first time. You're pissed at them, and you just want to get out of this argument.
Now please, try to behave yourself, he continued as he bent to softly brush his lips against mine. I held properly still this time. I learned my lesson. Then I sighed. This is insanely toxic. You promised Chief Swan that you would have me home early, remember? We'd better get going. That was Bella's line. I read that wrong. Yes, ma'am. She said Chief Swan, so I assumed it was Edward.
Well,
But I forgot she calls
told
Charlie.
him.
Yeah, I got it.
She doesn't call him Chief Swan. She was quoting Edward.
He smiled wistfully
She calls him Charlie because she's a bitter, ungrateful child.
and released all of me but one hand. He led me a few feet through the tall, wet ferns and draping moss around a massive hemlock tree. And we were there, on the edge of an enormous open field in the lap of the Olympic peaks. It was twice the size of any baseball stadium. I could see the others there, Esme, Emmett, and Rosalie, sitting on a bare outcropping of rock. They were the closest to us, maybe 100 yards away. Much farther out, I could see Jasper and Alice at least a quarter of a mile apart, appearing to throw something back and forth, but I never saw any ball. It looked like Carlisle was marking bases, but could they really be that far apart? When we came into view, the three on the rocks rose. Esme started towards us. Emmett followed after, as a long look at Rosalie's back. Rosalie had risen gracefully and strode off towards the field without a glance in our direction. My stomach quivered uneasily in response. Was that you we heard, Edward? Esme asked as she approached. I can't stop calling her Esme. It's Esme. It sounded like a bear choking, Emmett clarified. I smiled hesitantly at Esme. That was him. Bella was being unintentionally funny, Edward explained, quickly settling the score. Alice had left her position and was running, or dancing, towards us. She hurtled to a fluid stop at our feet. It's time, she announced. As soon as she spoke, a deep rumble of thunder shook the forest beyond us, and then crashed westward towards town. Eerie, isn't it? Emmett said with an easy familiarity, winking at me. Let's go. Oh, let's go. Alice reached for Emmett's hand, and they darted towards the oversized field. She ran like a gazelle. He was, he was nearly as graceful, yet Emmett could never be compared to a gazelle. Are you ready for some ball? Edward asked, his eyes eagerly bright.
Ball is life.
I tried to sound appropriately enthusiastic. Go team. He snickered and after mussing my hair, bounded off after the other two. His run was more aggressive, a cheetah rather than a gazelle. And he quickly overtook them. The grace and power still took my breath away. "Shall we go down?" Esme asked in her soft melodic voice. Esme. Esm. And I realized I was staring open-mouthed after him. I quickly reassembled my expression and nodded. Esme kept a few feet between us, and I wondered if she was still being careful not to frighten me. She matched her stride to mine, without seeming impatient at the pace. "You don't play with them?" I asked shyly. "No, I prefer to referee. I like keeping them honest," she explained. "Do they like to cheat?" "Oh, yes. You should hear the arguments they get into. Actually, I hope you don't. You would think we were raised like a pack of wolves." "You sound like my mom," I laughed, surprised. She laughed too. "Well, I do think of them as my children in most ways. I never could get over my mothering instincts. Did Edward tell you I had lost a child?" Damn. Just trying to play some just trying to play some baseball.
I don't need to know about all that.
"No," I murmured, stunned, scrambling to understand what lifetime she was remembering. "Ah, yes, my first and only baby. He died just a few days after he was born, the poor tiny thing," she sighed. "It broke my heart. That's why I jumped off the cliff, you know." Damn! Like, just coming out here to have a good time.
Is this just something you dump on everyone you meet?
"Edward just said you fell," I stammered. "Always the gentleman," she smiled. "Edward was the first of my new sons."
I tried to kill myself.
I've always thought of him that way, even though he's older than I am. In one way, at least. Ugh. She smiled at me warmly.
She shies away from it now, but when Carlisle said he killed himself or something, she was like, "How'd he do it?"
How'd he do it? Well, it's because, that was to Edward. This is just her telling her directly. "That's why I'm so happy that he's found you, dear." The endearment sounded very natural on her lips. "He's been the odd man out for far too long. It's hurt me to see him alone." "You don't mind, then?" I asked hesitant, "that I'm all wrong for him?" "No," she was thoughtful. "You're what he wants. It'll work somehow," she said, though her forehead creased with worry. Another peal of thunder began. Esme then stopped. Apparently we'd reached the edge of the field. It looked as if they had formed teams. Edward was far out in left field. Carlisle stood between the first and second bases, and Alice held the ball, positioned on the spot that must be the pitcher's mound. Emmett was swinging an aluminum bat. It whistled almost untraceably through the air. I waited for him to approach the home plate, but then I realized as he took his stance that he was already there. Farther from the pitcher's mound than I would have ever thought possible. Jasper stood several feet behind him, catching for the other team. Of course, none of them wore gloves. "All right," Esme called out in a clear voice, which I knew even Edward would hear as far out as he was. "Batter up." Alice stood straight, deceptively motionless. Her style seemed to be stealth rather than an intimidating wind-up. Well, that's opposite of the movie. She held the ball in both hands at her wrists, and then like the strike of a cobra, her right hand flicked out the ball, smacked into Jasper's hand. "Was that a strike?" I whispered to Esme. "If they don't hit it, it's a strike," she told me. That's not how baseball works. That would be a ball. Jasper hurled the ball back to Alice's waiting hand. She permitted herself a brief grin, and then her hand spun out again.
It's only a ball if they throw outside the strike zone.
I guess so. I don't know how baseball works. I hate baseball.
I play baseball. I like baseball.
There you go. This time the bat somehow made it around in time to smash into the invisible ball. The crack of impact was shattering, thunderous. It echoed off the mountains. I immediately understood the necessity for the thunderstorms.
It's not really necessary, they're just extra as fuck. They could play normal baseball if they just didn't go all out like a bunch of hooligans.
The ball shot like a meteor above the field, flying deep into the surrounding forest. "Home run?" I asked. "Wait," Esme cautioned, listening intently, one hand raised. Emmett was a blur around the bases, Carlisle shadowing him. I realized Edward was missing. "Out!" Esme cried in a clear voice. I stared in disbelief as Edward sprang from the fringe of the trees, ball in his upraised hand, his wide grin visible even to me. "Emmett hits the hardest, but Edward runs the fastest," Esme explained. The inning continued before my incredulous eyes. It was impossible to keep up with the speed at which the ball flew, the rate at which their bodies raced across the field. Do what?
It would be so incredible.
Yeah, because it just looked like they're glitching out here and there.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting for 30 seconds. That's why they had to have it be a music video in the movie.
Because you'd watch it for like a few seconds to be like, wow, that's wild. And
Yeah.
you'll probably be on your phone.
They don't have phones in this for some reason.
Yeah.
I remember when this book came out, I had a cell phone. I learned the other reason they waited for the thunderstorms to play, when Jasper, trying to avoid Emmett's infallible fielding, hit a ground ball towards Carlisle. Carlisle ran into the ball and then raced to Jasper to first base. When they collided, the sound was like a crash of two massive falling boulders.
Oh, why?
I jumped up in concern, but they were safe. Safe, Esme called out in a calm voice. Emmett's team was up by 1. Rosalie managed to flit around the bases after tagging up one of Emmett's long flies. When Edward caught the third out, he sprinted to my side, sparkling with excitement. "What do you think?" he asked. "One thing's for sure.
Boring.
I'll never be able to sit through dull old Major League Baseball again." "And it sounds like you did so much before," he laughed. "Well, I'm a little disappointed," I teased. "Why?" "Well, it would be nice if I could find just one thing you didn't do better than anyone else on the planet." He flashed his special crooked smile. Yeah, called being a good boyfriend, there's one. "I'm up," he said, heading for the plate. He played intelligently, keeping the ball low, out of the reach of Rosalie's always ready hand in the outfield, gaining 2 bases like lightning before Emmett could get the ball back in play.
You can stop dick riding for like 2 whole seconds. That would be enough for me to feel refreshed enough to put up with it.
Carlisle knocked one so far out of the field with a boom that it hurt my ears, and then he and Edward both made it in. Alice slapped them dainty high fives. That's its own sentence, so it just sounds strange. She slapped them dainty high fives. The score constantly changed as the game continued, and they razzed each other like any other street players. Occasionally, Esme would call them to order. The thunder rumbled on, but we stayed dry just as Alice had predicted. Carlisle was up to bat, Edward catching when Alice suddenly gasped. My eyes were on Edward as usual, and I saw his head snap up to look at her. Their eyes met, and something flowed between them in an instant. He was at my side before the others could ask Alice what's wrong. "Alice?" Esme's voice was tense. "I didn't see. I couldn't tell," she whispered. All the others were gathered by this time. "What is it, Alice?" Carlisle asked with the calm voice of authority. "They were traveling much quicker than I thought I could see. I had the perspective all wrong," she murmured. Jasper leaned over, his posture protective. "What changed?" he asked. "They heard us playing and it changed their path," she said contrite, as if she felt responsible for whatever had frightened her. 7 pairs of quick eyes flashed my face and away. "How soon?" Carlisle said, turning to Edward. A look of intense concentration crossed his face. "Less than 5 minutes. They're running. They want to play," Edward scowled. "Can you make it?" Carlisle asked him. His eyes flickered towards me. "No, not carrying," he cut short. "Besides, the last thing we need is for them to catch the scent and start hunting." "How many?" Emmett asked Alice. 3, she answered tersely. 3, he scoffed. "Let them come." The steel bands of muscle flexed along his arms. For a split second, that seemed much longer than it really was. Carlisle deliberated. Only Emmett seemed unperturbed. The rest stared at Carlisle's face with anxious eyes. "Let's just continue the game," Carlisle finally decided. His voice was cool and level. Alice said they were simply curious. All this was said in a flurry of words that lasted only a few seconds. I had listened carefully and caught most of it, though I couldn't hear what Esme now asked Edward with a slight vibration of her lips. I only saw that the slight shake of his head and the look of relief on her face. "You catch, Esme," he said. "I'll call it for now." And he planted himself in front of me. The others returned to the field, warily sweeping the dark forest with their sharp eyes. Alice and Esme seemed to orient themselves around where I stood. "Take your hair down," Edward said in a low, even tone. I obediently slid the rubber band out of my hair, and it shook out before me. I stated the obvious. "The others are coming now." "Yes. Stay very still, keep quiet, and don't move from my side." He hid the stress of his voice well, but I could hear it. He pulled my long hair forward, around my face. "That won't help," Alice said softly. "I could smell her across the field." "I know." A hint of frustration colored his tone. Carlisle stood at the plate, and the others joined the game half-heartedly. "What did Esme ask you?" I whispered. He hesitated for a second before he answered. "Whether they were thirsty," he muttered unwillingly. The seconds ticked by. The game progressed with apathy now. I guess he can read their thoughts. No one dared to hit harder than a bunt, and Emmett and Rosalie and Jasper hovered in the infield. Now and again, despite the fear that numbed my brain, I was aware of Rosalie's eyes on me. They were expressionless, but something about the way she held her mouth made me think she was angry. Edward paid no attention to the game at all.
You brought shit to her
family. Eyes and mind ranging the forest. I'm sorry, Bella. Edward muttered fiercely. It was stupid, irresponsible to expose you like this. I'm so sorry. I heard his breath stop, and his eyes zeroed in on the right field. He took a half step, angling himself between me and what was coming. Carlyle, Emmett, and the others turned in the same direction, hearing sounds of passage, much too faint for my ears. That is actually the end of Chapter 17.
They're not thirsty, but they are horny.
And, yeah, there we go. That was the game, apparently. It's much less exciting in the book than the movie.
Well, they don't have the music.
Well, they don't have the music, but also just it was more exciting in general.